Right now. Okay. Oh, okay. We got somebody else logging in. Good, good, good. Again, welcome to Legal Aid's presentation on home ownership basics. We'll get started in a minute. Our presenter tonight, Annie, will take questions during her presentation through chat. So you can use the chat feature in Zoom to send her a question. And then at the very end of her presentation, she'll just throw it open to anybody who wants to unmute themselves to ask a question. All right. Okay, Annie, I think we can get started. So thanks and welcome.
Okay. All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. Like Mark said, I'm Annie Nemand, Annie Williams-Nemand, excuse me. This is a new thing. I'm a staff attorney in the Regional Housing Unit here at Legal Aid. Let's see. Let's get this to work. All right. There we go. So Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania operates in the 4 counties surrounding Philadelphia. So we're in Bucks, Montco, Chester, where the Phoenixville Library is located, and Delaware County. We offer free legal services to qualifying clients in various areas, including family law, housing, and public benefits, among others. Here's a list. So I always tell people, if you're not sure if we can help, you should call intake, because there are several different ways that we can take clients. We take clients who make beneath a certain threshold of money. We also take people who are elderly. So if you're not sure if we're going to be able to help, just give us a call, and we're able to offer our legal advice and legal help for free. So oftentimes we're doing the same work as private attorneys, but a whole lot cheaper. So today we're going to talk about what I focus on at Legal Aid, which is housing law. So we're going to cover foreclosures, reverse mortgage foreclosure, tax sales, which are actually coming up, and so you might have heard about these recently. We have ejectments, and then we're going to talk briefly about COVID-19 protections. Okay, so here are some of the relevant laws. We have the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, which we call RESPA. We have the Real Estate Tax Sale Law, which is RETSL. We're going to talk about Act 91, which is the Homeowners Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program, also known as HeMAP. And then we have some HUD mortgagee letters. This one on the screen in particular speaks to reverse mortgages. And we will get to that. We'll get to all of these in turn. So let's start with foreclosures. So first of all, what is a mortgage? Because when we're talking about foreclosures generally, we're talking about mortgage foreclosure. So a mortgage is a loan that is secured by property. Oftentimes people will get mortgages in order to buy a home. That home then becomes collateral for the loan. So if the borrower can't pay back the loan, the mortgage company or the bank will foreclose and they take the house back, and they'll take that back in payment of the debt. So there are a lot of different reasons why a person might not be able to make their mortgage payments. And sometimes it's just the mortgage company that screws up. When that happens, I can oftentimes help clients, and I will lead them through what's known as the RESPA QWR process. So again, that's the Real Estate Sales Procedures Act. And the QWR stands for Qualified Written Requests. So with that process, we can formally request answers and information about a person's mortgage. Because oftentimes when you're trying to call and get information about your mortgage, the people on the phone are less than helpful. So this is a very useful process, and they are required to respond within a certain set amount of time. So I like doing that for clients. That's really helpful. And through that process, we can usually find out where the problem has arisen or where the misunderstanding came into play. So most often though, I'm helping people who have mortgage problems just because they've missed their payments. Their payments might have become overly burdensome and unaffordable. And sometimes a person just suffers a temporary hardship. But then by the time they can pay it back, the lender has already escalated the loan, or they've added so many fees that it becomes almost impossible to repay. So at that point, when a person has defaulted on their loan, that's when the bank or mortgage company is going to file to foreclose on the house. But before they can file to foreclose, in most cases, they have to give notice. And that notice is known as Act 91. which is, that's the law that instated HeMAP, which is the Homeowners Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So most of what I do at Legal Aid is help people who've gotten into this kind of situation try to get out of it. Whether they're saving their home in the process is really up, that is up to the person who is in foreclosure. So it's, a case-by-case basis. We're not able to save everyone's homes, but we try to save people's homes as often as we can. And even if they aren't able to save the home, I can oftentimes help them find solutions. So I spend a lot of my time advising clients on foreclosure and how to avoid it. And usually that means I can help them file an answer to the foreclosure lawsuit. And that gets them some extra time in the house and some extra time to find a solution. Definitely more time than if a default judgment was taken. And the default judgment's taken when a party just doesn't respond to the complaint at all. So that's when you're sued and you just kind of ignore it, which happens more often than you'd think. So if a borrower can't stop the foreclosure and they lose their lawsuit, the house is eventually sold at a sheriff's sale. So I want to talk a bit about the timeline of a foreclosure case, because most people think that it happens very quickly, and it doesn't, especially in Pennsylvania. We have a judicial foreclosure process. Unlike some states, ours goes through the courts, which gives us an opportunity to buy time. So the foreclosure lawsuit itself takes about 6 months. And then after that comes a sheriff's sale. And that process takes about another 3 months. So already we're up to 9. And then after that comes an ejectment. So if we can't save the home, the new buyer has to initiate an entirely new lawsuit, and that's an ejectment lawsuit. Like I said, that takes about 6 months. So when somebody comes to me, I tell them we have 9 months to work on saving the home, because we have up until the sheriff's sale, up until technically the day of the sheriff's sale, but realistically, we need things taken care of at least a couple weeks before then, because it's just hard when you're coming in the day of to try to save the house. So, but we have 9 months to save the house. And if we can't, then through answering the lawsuit, we can usually get another 6 months in the home. So worst case scenario, the client comes to Legal Aid and I can help them stay in the house for approximately 15 months. And sometimes it's more time and sometimes it's less time. It's usually not less than a year. So I always tell clients you'll have at least a year, probably 15 and maybe more. So let's talk more about how you can save a home from foreclosure. There are a lot of different options. So the first one is the easiest, as you can imagine, and that's just to pay off the loan. But here at Legal Aid, that's not usually a solution, because if a person can pay off the loan, first of all, they're probably not going to qualify for legal aid help, and then they might have just already paid off the loan in the first place, so they don't need an attorney. Another option is to sell the house. So that would be, you would sell the house, you pay off the mortgage, and you would keep the equity. So this is a solution for some people. Sometimes it's not. If I have a client who's underwater in the loan, which means that they owe more on the mortgage than the house is worth, they can't sell the home, but they might be able to get permission from the lender. So like I said, this is for people underwater in their mortgage, meaning that they owe more than the house is worth. And you ask permission of the lender to short sell, because you're asking them permission to accept the market value of the home in lieu of the entire loan. And you're asking them to forgo suing you for the deficiency. So let's say that the house is worth $250,000, but your loan was worth $300,000. So there's a $50,000 deficiency there. You would be asking the lender to accept $50,000 less than they're owed. And oftentimes they will give permission, because they know that's probably the best offer, and that's their best bet. So it's not hard to get permission to do that. But when somebody is in over their head, in underwater, let's say, that is often a good solution. So a third option is to reinstate the loan. So to reinstate the loan, you need to pay back the missed payments plus late fees. So you're paying arrearage, so all the arrears every month you've missed, you're paying that plus late fees. If this is going to be an option, the sooner you do it, the better, because the late fees really do add up. So next, a person can refinance the loan. Basically, a person would be getting an entirely new mortgage to buy out the first mortgage. For that, a person needs good credit because they're essentially getting an entirely new loan. But if they can, and if they can refinance, they're going to get probably lower interest rates. They're going to extend the life of the loan. Most loans go for 30 years. So let's say you've already paid for 10. They're going to extend it back out to 30 years. So that can lower the price and lower the monthly fees you're paying, plus the interest rates. And that can make the mortgage more affordable. So sometimes that is an option. The next option is loss mitigation. Most of the time that means applying for a loan modification. So a loan modification can be helpful because it takes all the past due payments and late fees and it tacks them onto the end of the loan. So, and that too can change the interest, it can change the life of the loan, and it can lower the payments that you're paying every month. But in order to get a loan modification, the lender usually needs to see that the borrower has income and the ability to pay. They're not going to want to give a loan modification to somebody who will not be able to pay anyway. So, okay, let's move on to my favorite option for saving a home for mortgage foreclosure, if it's not weird to have a favorite. That's HeMAP. It's the Homeowners Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program. So like I said, that was created in Act 91 in Pennsylvania. So it's run by the PHFA, which is the PA Housing Finance Agency. And HeMAP does not apply to FHA loans. So if you have an FHA loan, you're out of luck. You can still save the house, I'm not saying that, but you can't get HeMAP. So if a person applies for HeMAP and is approved, what they get is a very low interest government loan that cures the default. So this basically reinstates the loan. It pays the arrearage, it pays the fees, but instead of paying the mortgage company, you're paying the government. But like I said, it's really low interest, so sometimes it's a good option just to save the house from foreclosure and get back on track. You're paying the government back over a 3 to 5 year period. Alternatively, sometimes HeMAP can help borrowers make their payments going forward. This doesn't happen very often, but ostensibly it is an option. So the HeMAP loan itself is recorded as a mortgage. And like I said, it has to be paid back within 3 to 5 years. And something interesting about HeMAP, you have to apply through a certified housing counselor. So in our area, most people use Clarify. There are a couple others. There's Credit Counseling Center or American Credit Counseling Institute. Clarify, like I said, is the most popular, and they do get really good results. So you have to apply through them, which is really good because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of collecting documents, and they can help make that easier for you. These credit counselors are also nonprofits, so there's no fee attached. These housing counselors can also help with loan modifications. So oftentimes I'll send my clients to a housing counselor to apply for a loan modification and HeMAP at the same time. So to be eligible for HeMAP, a person must live in the home. They can't be delinquent by more than $60,000 or 24 months. The borrower has to be suffering an economic hardship beyond their control. So that means job loss, reduction in pay, serious medical problems, but it's got to be beyond their control, something they couldn't have helped. And the borrower must have a reasonable prospect of resuming full mortgage payments within 24 months. Okay, so let's move on to Chapter 13, bankruptcy. That is the last option we're going to talk about for saving a home from foreclosure. So that's a debt reorganization. Most people, when they think of bankruptcy, think of a Chapter 7 where all your debts are discharged, and that happens to some extent in a Chapter 13, but for the most part, you're paying back your secured debt. And a secured debt is one where you have property that's securing the loan. So a mortgage is an example of a secured debt. Unsecured debt is also discharged in Chapter 13, so that would be medical bills, credit card bills, things like that that have just become unaffordable. Now, any kind of bankruptcy is going to affect your credit score and your credit rating. So that is one of the bad things about filing for bankruptcy. but for some people, it really is a wonderful option for saving the home. It puts an immediate stay on any lawsuit. So it immediately stops a foreclosure. It will stop a sheriff's sale. This is one of the ways you can stop a sheriff's sale the day of. I have seen that done before. And like I said, any of these options to save a home from foreclosure can be instituted right up until the sheriff's sale. Like I said, I like to have a little wiggle room, but up until the day of the sheriff's sale, any of these will work. Okay, I think that's about it for the mortgage foreclosure part of this. Does anybody have any questions? Let me check the chat box, or you can jump in and ask me. Okay. All right, well, there'll be
I'm
time for
sorry,
questions.
can you explain short sale again? Why
Sure,
would you
okay.
want to, yeah, because I just want, because maybe I misunderstood something.
Sure. So a short sale is useful when the person owes more than the home is worth. So they already know they're not going to be able to save the home because they're in over their head. They're underwater in the mortgage. So like I said, let's say that you get a loan for $300,000 and now the value of the house has gone down and you owe the mortgage company more than the house is worth. So you would be asked to get out from under that and to avoid the really big credit hit that a foreclosure would put on your credit score, because obviously foreclosure is going to affect your credit. Some people will instead ask to sell the house for what it is worth and then give all of that money to the mortgage company. And then in return, the mortgage company will forgive the rest of the loan, because the mortgage company isn't getting their full payment. Because if they were, they'd be getting the $300,000, but you can't even get $300,000 for the house anymore because it's only worth $250,000. So that's why you have to ask permission. But it can be helpful for people when they just want out, of, they're having these problems and they just want to start over, start fresh. So they will pretty much just sign over the house in exchange for being let out of the loan.
Thank
Does that
you.
help? Sure.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Let's move on to reverse mortgages and reverse mortgage foreclosure. So a lot of people don't know that you can have a reverse mortgage be foreclosed on too. So because reverse mortgage is a contract just like a regular mortgage. And if you break the contract, they're going to want their payment, and that's the house. So what's a reverse mortgage? If you own your house and you're 62 or older, a reverse mortgage could let you stay there and access the home's equity without selling or moving from the property. It lets you borrow against your home's equity so you get cash without selling the house. You can either receive a lump sum payout, regular payments over time, or a line of credit that lets you take out the money when you need it. You don't have to pay the mortgage back while you're living there. What happens is that you keep paying the property insurance and property taxes, but that's all you pay. In return, though, the reverse mortgage company is going to take the house when you finally leave the house or when you die. And that's the catch. So the loan becomes due when you move out, you sell your home, or you pass away. Your heirs can pay off the loan if they want to keep the property, because you can pay down the debt. You don't have to pay down the debt, but let's say that you did want to leave the house to your heirs. You could pay down the debt as you can, and then your heirs would have the opportunity to pay off the rest of the debt and keep the house, or they can give the house to the reverse mortgage company. And I say give, it's not really giving. That's the collateral for the loan. They give you money up front for the house later on, and that's what a reverse mortgage is. A lot of people think it's a scam. And to be honest with you, it's not good for everybody. I'd say about half of my clients, it's a viable option for, but half of my clients I tell, don't even look into it. This will not work for you. It really depends on how much you need, how much money you have in the house, and what your plans are for after you leave the house. So one catch is that the house has to be your primary residence, and you have to repay the property taxes and the property insurance. So you have to keep up with those. The lender is going to consider a change of residence to have occurred if the borrower lives outside of the property for more than 6 months in a year for non-medical reasons, or if it's for medical reasons, you can't live out of the house for 12 consecutive months. So there's a little wiggle room here. I've heard that as long as you live in the house for 1 day out of that year, that the reverse mortgage stays put. You just have to prove to them that you did live there for 1 day out of the year if it's for medical reasons. But again, just the main gist is that you get money now and then you give them the house later. So that's typically what a reverse mortgage is. So like I said, if the reverse mortgage is not paid back before the death of the borrower or by the time the borrower leaves the house, then the reverse mortgage company gets the house. The heir has an opportunity to pay off that debt, or they can buy the house for 95% of the fair market value. Oftentimes, it's cheaper just to pay off the debt if somebody wants to keep the house. So like I said, it's really important to keep up with property taxes or property insurance, because that's one of the reasons that they can foreclose on you if you do have a reverse mortgage. There are ways to avoid that though. So what I do at Legal Aid, I can help people who have reverse mortgages but have fallen behind in property charges. I can help them get into a repayment plan, and I can help them with an at-risk extension. Now, the at-risk extension is actually my favorite thing to do, and that's because it's for older people who can't afford the property charges, and it's a very simple application. But the end result is that the person doesn't have to continue paying the property charges because we've proven that they can't afford it and that there's a medically necessary reason for them to stay in the home. So if a client is over 80 and has a medical condition that requires them to stay in the house and they can't afford the property charges, they can apply for an at-risk extension. If you're approved for the at-risk extension and it's HUD that would approve you, then that pushes back the foreclosure timeline by 1 year. But the thing is, you can get an infinite number of 1-year extensions. So that's what I really like about the at-risk extension. So who pays the property taxes and insurance then? Well, the lender does, but they're repaid by HUD because most or all reverse mortgages are insured by HUD. So like I said, the reverse mortgage borrower can extend the foreclosure process for an infinite number of 1-year periods, as long as every year they recertify: 1, they're over 80, so they're still old; 2, they still need to stay in the house, so they're frail or they have a medically necessary reason to stay there; and 3, they can't afford the property taxes or insurance. So the most onerous part of getting an at-risk extension is getting a doctor's letter, which actually isn't very hard to do. You just have to go to the doctor. And I've seen lots of different reasons for people to get at-risk extensions. So if someone's blind or they have bad eyesight, but they're used to their house, I mean, that's enough for an at-risk extension. So very easy to get, very helpful. So that's my favorite part of what I do at Legal Aid, I'd say. Any questions about reverse mortgages or at-risk extensions?
Hi, just a quick question. You mentioned that with the reversal mortgage, so what do you mean by lump sum payment? Do they just give you the money and you do whatever you want to do with it? And then, because I saw the lump sum payment and there was 2 other things, and you mentioned something about you only have to pay for certain things. Yeah, lump sum payout. What's the difference, like lump sum payout, regular payments over time, and line credit?
Sure. So there's some people who just really need the money. Let's say, I can't come up with something right now. I'm not that creative off the top of my head, but let's just say they really need the money and they have a lot of equity in their house. They're basically trading their house after they leave for money now. So they can get a lump sum payout, in which case they're going to get, depending on how much equity they can get tens of thousands of dollars right now in a check. I'm not saying it's that quick. It's kind of a lengthy process. I think to get a reverse mortgage, I've not seen it done in less time than half a year. But if there's another legal problem pressing on them, we can usually talk to the opposing counsel and get that extended. So So the lump sum payout they can have quickly. Regular payments over time would be for somebody who just isn't able to get by on, let's say, their Social Security, and they would like to get regular checks. So every month, let's say the mortgage company will deposit money into their account. Or a line of credit, which allows you to take out the money when you need it. So those are the three options to get paid in a reverse mortgage. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, so when would you really use the regular payments over time? So do you pay the mortgage company back?
You don't have to. And that's the beauty of the reverse mortgage, that you really don't have to pay them back. I have a client right now who, she had a regular mortgage, but the payments got to be too much for her, and she was almost done paying. She did not owe very much on the mortgage. So I advised her on reverse mortgages, and she's in the process of getting one because she couldn't get by month to month. She didn't have enough money to get by month to month. So right now, when she gets her reverse mortgage, she's going to get just a little bit of a boost every month. So, and that depends on how much equity she had in the house. Like I said, she owned 3/4 of the house. She did not owe too much left on her conventional mortgage. But now, and then one thing to note is that she didn't have any children. She didn't have any heirs. So she didn't really care too much about what happened to the house after she passes away. So since that's the case, she is getting money now, and they're going to get the house later. I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure. Anyone else? All right, let's move on to tax sales. So like I said, tax sales, they happen in the month of September. So legal aid, we're getting pretty busy with them. So what is an upset tax sale? And I'm talking about this, in relation to foreclosures, because this is also known as a tax foreclosure. So when a Pennsylvania resident fails to pay their real estate taxes for 2 or more years, the money they owe becomes delinquent, and the government has the authority to sell the house in order to recoup their loss. So in other words, if you owe property taxes and you haven't paid, and it's more than 2 years, then the government is going to sell the house to get the money they're owed. So this is an upset tax sale, also just known as a tax sale, and these are conducted by the county's tax claim bureau. So every county has a tax claim bureau, and I'm finding that some are easier to work with than others this year. And the Chester Tax Claim Bureau is, they're a doozy this year. So, but at Legal Aid, I will try to help clients interface with the Tax Claim Bureau. Sometimes we can get them a repayment plan, and that will help them save the house immediately. And then instead of having to pay their taxes back in a lump sum, they pay it back over time. So at a tax sale, the delinquent property is sold subject to the existing liens. So the mortgages, any judgments are still tacked on there. The minimum price of the tax sale is the amount of the delinquent taxes, the current year's taxes, interest, municipal claims, plus costs. So say all that to say that you might have a person who owns a $500,000 home, and they're only behind in taxes by $10,000. Well, the county only cares about getting their $10,000. So that house might sell for $20,000, in which case the person is just out of luck. So that's why tax sales, I try to help clients avoid them, because oftentimes they're losing almost any equity they have in the house. Because like I said, the county is not motivated to get more than what they're owed. Because anything that they get above and beyond what they're owed goes to the person who owned the house. But they're not trying to get out of the house the actual value of the home. They're trying to get out the taxes. So the simplest way to save a home from tax sale is to pay off the debt. So to stop the house, to stop the sale, a person needs only to pay the debt from 2 or more years ago. So for example, the tax sales that are happening this month, they're between, well, let's see. The Chester County tax sale is September 14th. In Montco, it's the 24th. So after the second week, it seems like, but before the last week of September. But the houses that are up for tax sale this year, they owe for 2018 and before. So if you only owe for your 2019 taxes, your house won't go up for tax sale. So whether or not the tax claim bureaus like to hear this, I advise my clients that as long as you're only 1 year behind, you're safe. But if you get to be 2 or more years behind on your property taxes, then they could come after your house. So if a client can't pay off their debt, they should call the tax claim bureau. The tax claim bureaus can oftentimes make a tax payment arrangement. So a person will be paying less than a lump sum and just be paying that back over time. Another way to stop a tax sale is to obtain separate financing. So a person can take out a private loan to pay off the taxes, but a person will run into problem if they don't have a high enough credit score, because again, you're taking out a whole new loan. Another option to save a home from tax sale is a Chapter 13 bankruptcy again. Like I said, it's a debt reorganization, so you're paying back most of what you owe, especially taxes, property taxes, because the house is leverage. So that is secured debt. You have to pay that back, but you have 3 to 5 years to do that, and it immediately saves the house. So at Legal Aid, I try to help people in this predicament by advising them to get in touch with the tax claim bureau as soon as they can. Sometimes they need extra help, and so I can contact the tax claim bureau on their behalf with varying success. Like I said, the Chester County Tax Claim Bureau has been a little hard to work with. So, but one important thing to note is that there's no lawsuit before a tax sale. So we don't really have a chance to slow it down through the judicial process. Like I said, with foreclosures, that can last up to a year before the person is actually out of the house. I say up to, I mean at least a year. But with a tax sale, you're given notice a couple months before the sale, but there's not really much we can do to stop it unless there's a really good reason to petition the court. But ostensibly, somebody knows that they're behind on taxes because they're going to have gotten numerous notices over the year. So if a person can't come to an agreement with the tax claim bureau, the house is going to be sold at the initial upset tax sale, which, like I said, is in September, or it's going to be relisted until it's sold. So they periodically have sales, and they put on those lists houses that never sold at the first or previous sales. But until the house is sold and the person is ejected, the resident is allowed to stay there. Which brings us to my next section, ejectments. So before I move on to ejectments, if anyone has any questions, I will take them. Okay. So in landlord-tenant law, you can evict somebody, and that's a pretty easy process. You go to a magisterial district court, of which there are quite a few in every county, and you file an eviction. And that's how you can remove an occupant who's broken their lease or, something like that. In housing law, you can't just evict people though. So because we're talking about people who have legally owned the house, they have greater rights to the house. So what you have to do is file an ejectment. And that is filed in the Court of Common Pleas. And it's filed to have a previous homeowner removed from the property that they no longer own. So like I said earlier, this process can take about 6 months, sometimes longer. An ejectment is what comes after the sheriff's sale and sometimes the tax sale. So since the ejectment action is filed in the Court of Common Pleas, the occupant must be given notice. They're given an opportunity to respond, and they have to be served a writ of execution before the sheriff ultimately changes the locks. So like I said, this is a judicial process. So we have the chance to kind of slow it down and get extra time in the house for the person. So at Legal Aid, when I get an ejectment case, I'm looking to extend the amount of time a person has in the house so they can save up money and once they leave the house, hopefully land on their feet. So I will try to help them find a housing plan. I will point them to some contacts that Legal Aid has for affordable housing in the various counties. And hopefully, if they plan far enough in advance, which is something that I always advise that they do, hopefully they have a place to go to and they don't become homeless. So, and at no point in time will the date of the lock change be a surprise. So that's a misconception that a lot of people have, that they're going to be kicked out just right away. That's not the case. Like I said, the case has to happen first, and then the sheriff is going to come out and personally talk to the occupant, and together they come up with a date for the lock change. So, and it really is a big misconception. I've had clients packing bags because they're terrified that the cops are about to come and pick them out, kick them out. So I always advise them that they have time, but something that they might want to do is keep a record of having paid the bills, or, you know, a record of home ownership on them at all times. So when I have a client who's particularly scared that they're going to get kicked out of their home, I'll often advise them to keep just a utilities bill, either on their purse, you know, in their wallet, or in their glove box of the car, just in case they come home and the locks have been changed. In which case they can call the sheriff again and just say, this wasn't supposed to happen yet. And then they'll often be let back in. So the ejectment process, we can kind of extend by answering the complaint. And with that, my hope is that the person can either find a place to move to, they're saving money for a move eventually because they're not paying rent, and then they can actually make the move. But by the time the ejectment lawsuit is filed, there's no way to save the home. There's time to help them find a place to go to, but the house is gone. They have no chance of saving that. If they want to get the house, they have to buy it back, which often is not they don't have an option to do that. All right, so I'm going to move on to the COVID-19 protections, unless we have any questions about ejectments. Okay, all right. So, as if people haven't heard enough about COVID-19 yet, let's talk about it some more. So the federal government enacted the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. They enacted that in late March. That's known as the CARES Act. I'm sure everyone's heard about it. The CARES Act put a temporary moratorium on initiating and moving forward with foreclosures. That was for 2 months. That's gone. That ended in May. The moratorium was not extended federally, but Governor Wolf did extend it. He extended it until today. Today is the very last day that people are forbidden from filing foreclosures or moving forward with them. So starting tomorrow, most attorneys like myself in the state are preparing for an onslaught of new cases, which is going to be really fun and really terrible because the coronavirus has really affected a lot of people who would need legal aid help. So the moratorium that the CARES Act put into place, that's not helpful anymore. That was only helpful until May 17th of 2020. What is helpful about the CARES Act is that it's oftentimes allowing borrowers with certain types of mortgage to request forbearances. So they can get time off from paying the loan, they can get 6 months, and they can have another extension. So these are for people who have been affected by COVID, which, to be honest with you, the threshold is pretty low. So if you have a mortgage and you're having a hard time paying it because of COVID, then my advice is to ask your mortgage provider for a forbearance. So this applies to people with the following types of loans. So people with HUD loans, reverse mortgages, VA loans, USDA loans, anyone with a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan. But if you don't know what type of loan you have, I suggest that you ask anyway. You have to request the forbearance before either the end of the nationally declared pandemic, so when President Trump says this pandemic is over, or by the end of the year. So you still have time to do that, and you would get 6 months plus another 6 months if you request it of the forbearance. So what the forbearance means is that they're going to be able to forgo paying their mortgage for up to 1 year. But the mortgager, so the person who has a loan, they have to request it. It's not automatic. And during the forbearance, the lender can't charge additional fees, penalty, or interest. So like I said, if you aren't sure that you have a loan that qualifies, ask. Just ask your servicer and they'll let you know. And even if your loan isn't one of these loans that is required to offer forbearance, a lot of times mortgage companies are giving them anyway, just because they understand that this has been a hard time for everyone. So the borrower can have been delinquent before the pandemic. So you'll still get a forbearance if you were already behind in your payments, which might be getting people extra time to work on saving the home. So I have some clients who were already moving into foreclosure and now they have forbearances, which is giving them extra time to find options to save the home. So now they just have more time to work on a loan modification application or to work with a credit counselor to get HeMAP, which, like we talked about earlier, is the Homeowners Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program. So the borrower's still gonna owe the money. They're just forgiven for not paying it for right now. The lenders are handling it a little bit differently, but across the board, the lenders are going to be working with people who get forbearances. So they're going to be working with everyone to find a solution on a case-by-case basis. Some people, they're just going to get rolled into a loan mod, and others are just tacking the deferred amount onto the end of the loan and then extending the life of the loan, which essentially is giving a loan mod. But basically, we have decided, everyone, all the mortgage companies have gotten together and decided that at the end of the forbearance period, no one's going to be hit with a 12-month bill, because that was really the fear. So that's not going to happen, which is really great. So during the forbearance, though, if you're put into one, you still have to pay your property taxes and insurance and your HOA or condo fees. That is if you don't have an escrow account. So a lot of people have an escrow account with their mortgage, which means that they pay a little extra per month, but the mortgage company actually takes care of the property taxes and insurance for them. If you don't keep up with your property taxes and insurance or your HOA fees, then you risk being placed into an insurance policy by the mortgage company, which oftentimes isn't as good as if you have your own property insurance. So the last thing I want to say about the Federal CARES Act is that if you rent and your landlord is in forbearance with the CARES Act, then you cannot be evicted during this time. So there are a lot of rental protections too. We have another legal aid attorney who I believe is doing a whole presentation on rental protections and other landlord-tenant law. So if you're interested in that, you know, stay tuned. I'm not sure exactly the date. I'm sure Mark has some more information about that. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and there's not much to talk about, is the Pennsylvania specific COVID protections. So like I said, Governor Wolf had prohibited the initiation of foreclosures, but that ended today. So as of now, that date has not been extended. He's asked the legislature to address the issue, but they haven't done it yet. They might, but only time's going to tell. Meanwhile, individual counties have the power to extend the moratoriums on their own, but in our area, not many have. In fact, Delaware County is the only one that really has extended the moratorium. So these are protections for people who have been affected by the coronavirus and have a mortgage. If you have any questions about that or anything else, I'll take them now. I also want to note, here's my email address. So if anyone wants to write that down and shoot me an email later, happy to respond. All right, any questions, guys?
Feel free to unmute yourselves or type your question in the chat box.
All right, well.
I'll just mention that landlord-tenant workshop that you mentioned, Annie. is going to be on Wednesday, September 16th at 10 a.m. And you can register by calling the library or going on our events calendar at phoenixvillelibrary.org.
Great.
Mark, is that going to be an evening time since I work full time and I don't get home until like around now?
Is there going? No, that's only a daytime presentation.
Okay, thank you. And Andy, thank you so much. The presentation was extremely informative, actually.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, because some of the stuff I'm like, oh, really? Oh, I did not know that. Ooh, when I get older, I meant, sorry. When I get older, then, at least I can utilize it or call you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone should take down my email address. I'm always happy to help with anything. Even if you just have general questions about legal aid and how we can help, I can either try to shoot you to the right person. I'll help if I can. And if not, I can give you the number for our intake. So. Last call for questions.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Annie. We appreciate it. And
All
this
right.
video will be on the Phoenixville Library YouTube channel later this week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Good night, and good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.